This is Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. On the show, you'll hear from innovators in the food space. We'll have disruptive conversations with people from around the globe who are taking the lead on topics like food sustainability, ending world hunger, food security, and so much more. I'm your host, Paul Newnham. In this episode, we're talking to Alejandra Schrader. Alejandra is a plant-based nutrition certified chef and award-winning author. In today's conversation, Alejandra discusses her multifaceted career in sustainable food, emphasizing plant-based diets, food waste reduction, and biodiversity. You'll hear Alejandra explain the nutritional value and culinary potential of often discarded food parts. She'll share her journey from growing up in Caracas, Venezuela, to becoming an advocate for sustainable food systems. And Alejandra will offer practical tips for maximizing ingredient use at home. Let's get into it. Welcome to the show.
Hi, it's so good to be here.
Alejandra, I've had the pleasure of knowing you for some time, but how would you describe what you do?
That will be a task because I have my head in so many different places, but everything has to do with sustainable food. On one end, I am a plant-based nutrition certified chef, and I love to promote plants no matter what your lifestyle diet is. So if you're an omnivore, vegetarian, pescatarian, I'm just trying to tell you, eat more plants for the sake of biodiversity, but also for your own health. I'm also an author, an award-winning author, if I may add, of the low-carbon cookbook and action plan, Reduce Food Waste and Combat Climate Change with 140 sustainable plant-based recipes. I am also a public speaker. I am grateful to say that I'm on stages around the world talking about sustainable food systems from many perspectives, whether it's biodiversity, food waste, food is medicine, but also I'm an activist. So I work with a couple of organizations doing policy advocacy and basically promoting the well-being and the livelihoods of those that are not privileged like some of us are, and just trying to give voices to those people and to right the wrong.
Amazing. And there's so many areas that I want to dig into. So how did this journey start? Where did your relationship with food start, and how did you move into becoming a nutrition certified plant-based chef?
I wish I could take credit for it, but a lot of it was luck. I think I would have said bad luck 10, 12 years ago, but it all really came from my love of food and the relationship I had with food growing up in a third world country with limited resources.
Where was that?
That was in Caracas, Venezuela. And I grew up under the care of a single mother. We were 3 sisters, and having very little resources, we couldn't afford to eat out, to buy already made foods, frozen foods, canned foods. So everything had to be bought fresh, most of it produce and beans and grains. Meat was definitely a luxury. And so growing up in a family where recipes are passed from generation to generation, where you always eat at home. We have a saying in Spanish, hay comida en la casa. There is food at home. And that's usually referring to when you're out and you're like, Mommy, I'm hungry. Mommy, I want a snack. There's food at home. We go home and we cook things from scratch. And even though I was trained formally as an architect and an urban planner, having a master's degree in a career that unfortunately, really, it was one of those life's curveballs that made me lose my career and finally resource back to my love for food. I carried sustainability as the common denominator for every career I've ever pursued, and I applied those sustainability principles to food and eventually run with it.
You mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned being certified. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yes.
Because not all chefs are. They
Right.
obviously put a lot of food out, but
Right.
that education around nutrition is really interesting.
Yes, and thank you for pointing that out because it was precisely my personal interest in plant-based foods at a time where I was still cooking for clients of all different lifestyle diets and getting the constant question, but where do you get your protein from? Are you getting enough fiber? Are you sure that you're hitting all the micronutrients that you need? And I figured unless I get educated and get the science-based facts of where these macros are coming from, I'm never going to, quote unquote, get these people off my back. But it really was a hunger for knowledge. Like if I'm going to walk the talk, I need to do so with science as my guide. So I signed up. Cornell University has a program through the T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies. And I decided to get that certification, and it allowed me to understand, oh, okay, wait, and especially in America, we think we need way more protein than we really need to. Science says that we need about 0.8 grams of protein per weight, our weight in kilograms. That means that a person that is 150 pounds only really needs like 2.6 ounces of protein a day. So being able to understand the science allowed me to speak with more property about the kinds of food that I was trying to promote.
Yeah, and I can see how that would be really important. You talked about your cookbook being around zero waste. So can you explain a little bit more about how that intersects and the connections maybe with the nutrition side?
Yes. I think it all is tied up through the sustainability lens. As we know, especially in America, 30 to 40% of the food that we're producing is ending up in a trash bin. From that food that we throw away, about 53% is coming from homes, from the average home, not from restaurants, not from the retail industry. And so to understand that food waste was a real problem sparked my interest in it. There's a parallel story because of where I come from, and Venezuela is undergoing the worst humanitarian crisis of our history. And having conversations with my family, with my mother and my sister who still live there and who are telling me, yeah, it no longer matters whether you actually have money because you go to a market and you may not find not even a can of tuna. So people are resourcing to plantain peels, to carrot greens to make their foods. And I remember thinking about the two issues and tying them up. I was like, wow, on one end, we're throwing all this food away. On the other, even if it's based on humanitarian crisis and needs, people are being able to utilize this food. And I started my journey trying to understand, is there nutrition in some of these ingredients? And as science points out, yes, there are. I actually am an ambassador for the Periodic Table of Food Initiative. It's an initiative that is funded by the Rockefeller Foundation along with TIAD Biodiversity. And they are looking, my food is being sent to a lab for them to analyze their biomolecular composition. And this science is saying, yes, in banana peels or plantain peels, there's potassium, there's vitamin K, there's fiber. In carrot greens or radish greens, there are all these phytochemicals and antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. And so now we can say, wow, we are avoiding food waste for the sake of Mother Earth, but also for the sake of human health.
So as part of using your culture and your identity, your story, you've discovered these techniques that have been used, these flavors, these dishes. What's something that surprised you in that process?
How much amazing taste there is in some of these food waste ingredients, how useful they can be in our dishes, how much they can help us save money, how we can also utilize techniques that are traditionally used in similar ingredients on these food waste ingredients, and we can replicate some of the same flavors. Like, who knew that you could make a delicious kimchi with cauliflower leaves or with broccoli leaves, and it actually tastes just as good as those kimchis that are made with Napa cabbage or Savoy cabbage, for instance. And so I love to be able to surprise myself sometimes when I'm able to use something that we wouldn't assume it would have so much culinary value, and to be able to just avoid it going to waste when so many natural resources were used to grow these parts that we throw away is just priceless.
What I love about this is it's very accessible as well, because you're talking about ingredients that are very accessible. They're actually thrown away often. And so you're bringing them in, creating value around them, helping to really think through how you can construct or maybe swap them into different dishes.
Correct. And actually, that's a great point because that's the three-part benefit of food waste. On one end, we talked about sustainability. Second, we talked about health. But now we're talking about something just as important, which is the social impact, how food waste can help us close the nutrition and health gap for those people that don't have the access to good food, for those people who are making an investment in that cauliflower, in those carrots, in those eggplants, in those potatoes, and they're paying a price for it that they're able to maximize as well as reaping all of the benefits from that investment.
So this kind of strategic approach, you're really bringing a strategic approach. How do you think your training as an architect and looking at design really tie into this approach you're bringing to food?
Oh gosh, it's so related. On one end, with a sustainability mind in my previous professions, I've learned to be aware and also to try to find a solution about how anthropogenic actions like human generated greenhouse gases or how do we eat, how it affects the world around us, the atmosphere, our own bodies. On the other, being an architect and having an eye for the aesthetic, I also have the curiosity to create a dish that is visually appealing because unless food is delicious, colorful, and just sweet to the eye, people are not going to eat it. And so these are principles from my backgrounds that are always present when I create food. One of my favorite architectural principles is that form follows function. And I've carried that in every plate that I've made. Like, how can I make a plate of food that is sustainable, that promotes biodiversity, that is also healthy, that it promotes human health, but that is also delicious and appealing to our tastes.
I really like the way that you think on that also level. You think about those additional layers, and often in our food system, we don't see that. And so what do you think is helpful for people to think about when they're kind of approaching food, maybe in their own kitchen, and trying to think how they can make some shifts in the way that they're thinking? What are some ways that you would encourage people to follow?
Keeping an open mind for a new experience is always like a suggestion that I give to people, especially those starting in the kitchen, thinking about creative ways to utilize things that they haven't before. And that means, yes, food waste, but it also means if you go to a farmer's market and you see an ingredient you've never seen before, don't pass it. Actually, go and ask that farmer, what is this and how can I cook with it? Oh, that's a rutabaga, and this is how you can cook it at home. They would love to tell you. So have that creativity/curiosity, because unless we increase the number of fruits, vegetables, seeds, nuts, like plant-based ingredients, we're really not going to do our food systems grace. We are experiencing severe biodiversity loss, and unless we try to maximize the kind of plant-based ingredients at home, we're not really going to be part of the solution. So creativity, curiosity, and maybe a little bit of adventure.
So how is this knowledge that you've been developing and the experience that you have impacted the way your family eat?
To keep that, like, to an example that just happened last night, when I peel my lemons, because I do an in-home lemon ginger tea, which I make with natural and fresh ingredients and then freeze on ice cube trays so that I can have one each night. I save the peels of my lemons so I can dehydrate them and make a lemon powder so that then I can season with some other salt and herbs my husband's poultry items. Some things like that, like I think about the ingredients from root to leaf, and I try to maximize every little part of the ingredients that I do buy. I really, really try to walk the talk and try to get my 2-year-old son to eat the ingredients that I'm trying to promote out there. Like my son, I was very fortunate to use the baby-led weaning approach, which meant like I exposed him to a lot of foods early on done in his life. And the first food dish that I made for him was a black lentil soup at 4.5 months.
Amazing, amazing. As you're talking, I think it really requires imagination in the kitchen and an imagination around how do we see ingredients not as waste, not as like what we need and then we leave the rest, but as a whole ingredient. And then how do we bring that into our cooking and our practice?
Yes. And a lot of time, what that implies is you cannot find creative ways to use something that you've already put down in the trash or down the chute. So how about we preserve them? How about we clean them and we chop them and we put them in a silicone bag in our freezer until we can find out, oh, how can I use this corn husks? How can I reutilize the corn silk, which, by the way, not just my culture in Latin America, but in Asian cultures as well. Corn silk has been used for generations and generations to make a very amazing tea. So preserving before wasting and then investigating to see how these ingredients can be reused.
And where would you encourage people to go looking for like ideas around this? Obviously, you've got a cookbook, but where do you think people should be kind of going and looking?
There are so many resources out there, and we're grateful to live in the generation of Google, right? Where we can just look up useful ways to repurpose or to upcycle, which is a word that I love, a certain ingredient. There are great influencers like Plant You, who has like a whole series of wasteless kitchen ideas and recipes. And yeah, again, like using the resources that you do have available. My book, there's a great chef in Canada that I love, Anne-Marie, the zero waste chef, who has just such incredible ways, not just culinary applications, because she also shows you how to make a scrub or how to make a cleaning product that is actually sustainable and not damaging for your home. And so the resources are out there. We just have to find them.
As you're talking, it just starts opening up opportunity. And I think, in a world where prices are going up, where there's lots more pressure on us to think about what we purchase and how, it's really important for us to be remembering some of these techniques and remembering how we can do some of this. So one thing I'd like to kind of ask you about is, what's something that you've been in the last month really enjoying eating?
Beans. So, I'm a beaner. I'm a proud beaner. This is a term that has been used in a despective manner to refer to Latin American people. And I love to take that power back, and I now embraced it. I am a proud beaner. I think it's the OG plant-based protein. But I love the fact that it's like I can never know too much about beans. And so to answer specifically to your question, I've always loved lentils. In Venezuela, I didn't grow up knowing red lentils. And I've known them for a little bit, but now I find in like a huge new world of uses for red lentils. I soak them overnight and I just blend them with just a little bit of water. And I use a pan to make like tortillas. I can make like a protein-rich tortilla shells for my tacos or my son's tacos. I may add a little maple syrup, and now it's a little crepe. And the last thing I did yesterday was red lentil loaf of bread. And it's a gluten-free, protein-rich, sustainable, because red lentils being part of my favorite, the legume group. They're just so sustainable. And these are like just such delicious applications for beans that we just didn't know before. And my next project is actually a lentil cookie, because I'm trying to get my son to eat the healthiest possible. And there's so much sugar and just processed in everything that I'm right now soaking green lentils to make a lentil cookie for my son with a little bit of cocoa powder, maple syrup.
That sounds delicious and also amazing. But also, I love the way you're experimenting there. And so it's a lot of different varieties, from sweet to savory, different applications and techniques. And so all with very similar ingredients.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to another food waste hero, Chef Conor Spacey in Ireland, who I think first made me think about beans as a sweet option. And he has a zero waste black bean and coffee grind chocolate cake,
Brownie.
like a brownie
Yeah.
that I tested with his recipe. And it was so delicious. I just really love to also, sometimes we just have to keep our minds open. And right when we think we know everything, just to question that. Like, I loved it. And I think he has fabulous ideas to use, like pineapple peels for kombucha. And like, he really is another food waste hero that I admire and follow.
Well, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I really appreciate it.
You've been listening to Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. Future Fork is produced by Disruptive Consulting Solutions and supports the SDG2 Advocacy Hub. For more info, head to the website futureforkpodcast.com. This show was produced with strategy and production support from Wavelength Creative. So you don't miss an episode of Future Fork, make sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm Paul Newnham, and I'll see you in the next episode.